present TFT. We did present TFT some time back. So we struggled with what is it really that we did not say, or what the people in the space might benefit from. How can we add value to what we have said before? But just seeing that there are two of you, Doug and Fasil, were you in that meeting when Ginoca and I shared training for transformation? Just to check.
No.
Oh, Francis is here. Welcome, Francis. So let me just start by giving it a background. We have here Anne Hope, who is now late, and Sally Timel, who is retired and living in a home in the US. These are the founders of Training for Transformation. Their work is based on Paulo Freire, especially the book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and critical pedagogy, and of course with some other adult educators, but they really took the thinking of Freire, especially the 6 ideas that stand out from Freire, that of conscientization is key, and dialogue and listening surveys, just to mention a few. And this was started in the 70s in South Africa. I don't know how much of that, Doug, you are aware of, but we can go back to that later. So these are the founders of TFT. I will be talking more about the process of how the process was launched and how the process was grounded and how the process evolved to this day. So it has now foot in 61 countries, launched in the 70s. It is more than 50 years old. One thing that we know for sure that was confirmed also by the evaluation is that the training for transformation process is relevant for organizations that focus on achieving socio, economic, and environmental justice. But the question would be, what is it about its relevance that makes it spread globally? Before we go to that question, I have just highlighted this map, shows where the TFT practices are, but the map also misses that it is in the US and it is also in Australia, just for us to see. And there are illustrations that come with it. The Institute of Social Transformation in Uganda, working with market women, and the Star of Hope Center of Training for Transformation in Nigeria, and that has built houses. I will come back to this, but they illustrate how the grounding of TFT can be seen in the lives of people. I'm going back to the history. I have already talked about Anne Hope and Sally Timel, but the process was launched in South Africa with Anne Hope working with the South African Students' Union. And the Students' Union leader, whom we all know, is Steve Biko. And Steve Biko's partner, not the wife, he had 2 partners, Mampela Rampele was one of them, Dr. Mampela Rampele. She said if it was not for conscientization with Anne Hope, 1976 students' uprisals might not have happened in South Africa. It happened during those weekends when they would engage and then they would go and try it out. And it was in the 70s, after the arrest of Steve Biko, Anne Hope had to leave the country and go into exile. And we know that Steve Biko died then. But we follow this story into exile, where Anne Hope, now with Sally Timmer, launched the Development Education Leadership Training in Action, Delta, with Machakos Diocese of the Catholic Church in northern Kenya. And the process spread to other African countries, including Nigeria, Uganda, Zambia. In Asia, it spread to India, and it spread to the US. After 10 years, the initiative had reached 10 million people who launched projects to help themselves. That was an evaluation carried by Francis Muller. In the 80s, again, early 80s, Delta Experience was compiled into the first 3 volumes of Training for Transformation. Let me just bring that back. This is volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. They were then launched. They were written in the 80s and published by Mambo Press in Zimbabwe. What really stood out in the TFT space can be captured by this young woman who said, in the TFT space, I discovered that I had knowledge and contribute to my learning. So her voice became central in the learning process. And then in the 2000s, Anne went back to South Africa in 1994. And from that time, in the 2000s, Delta South Africa was launched in early 1994, 97, somewhere there. And TFT Volume 4, this one, on gender and environment, was launched. And then the Grail Center Trust worked with Kimage Development Study Center for a TFT diploma in development education. Other publications that were written within this period of 2000s is volume 5, which is TFT in practice. We don't have it there. TFT in practice, a collection of stories of people that were practicing and working in development and using the TFT skills. And they had to share their narratives, their experiences, their learnings, and their adaptations. And then another TFT, volume 6, which was simply looking at the tools that worked from the books and the tools the development activists designed to facilitate TFT processes. The last, which is now we are talking about TFT in practice, what do you call it? An organization was launched that grew out of the Training for Transformation Grail Center Trust program into an organization, which then promoted decentralization, which means entities of TFT being established in different parts of the world. I will go back to slide 2 to explain that again. One entity is the Institute of Social Transformation in Uganda. The other entity is the Star of Hope in Nigeria, and many in Asia, in India, So decentralization was that process. But the question that still stands out for us is, what is it about training for transformation that activists or organizations that focus on social justice find working? So we put that in 3 clusters. While when we are working in development, we always start with, what is the problem? Where is the problem? And everything is happening around. The niche with training for transformation is it starts with the individual, the identity, the identity of the individual, the identity of the collective. Who am I? Who are we? So that's where you find your voice, the power of voice and agency. And the process happens through dialogue. We know that dialogue is the flow of ideas. And when the ideas are flowing, one thing that works in this space is listening and discerning beyond listening. This is where we say training for transformation is spiritual work. Without spiritual work, civic activism, without discernment, civic activism can be a disaster. This is where you balance power and love. But what is the purpose of power and love? According to Freire, we all know it's to achieve freedom. If we don't achieve freedom in our conscientization or learning processes, then we promote the systems of oppression and marginalization. So this freedom is also expressed in taking responsibility and power of choice. I just have illustrations there of a young woman facilitating a process in Nigeria and a young man in Zimbabwe working with schoolgirls during COVID, and conversations in India during COVID. Thank you. So I'm going to slide 5. I might come back to that again, to any slide that will help us to understand, to connect with TFT. Right. When we go to the identity, who am I and who are we? When people find their identity and then they realize, as captured by this group of Western Papuans in Indonesia, we are the ones we are waiting for. We were waiting for. Those of us who might know Western Papua is still in the liberation struggle, and TFT has been journeying with them for 10 years now. They developed a 50-year plan for their liberation. And they agreed that awareness raising about the power of identity, the values that inform their identity, the actions that drive from the values, and how they engage, and the networks they work with. So these are some of the illustrations during conscientization or during dialogue, awakening the power of voice. Another illustration of dialogue comes from Angola. These are, most of them are human rights activists. They used to go and do their activism in the communities but now they've changed their approaches to planning with, implement with, and evaluate with people in Angola. They documented their process and went to the African Film Festival. I can't remember the country where it went, but they won the first prize of best practices of human rights activism with people and for people. And the key questions there when we engage with people is, what is the problem? What are people's experiences of the problem from their perspective? Whose voice matters? Discern a little bit. What are we called to see, be, and do? What are the systemic and structural barriers that, from people's perspective, that block or can promote or support their work? And the critical question is here, why? Why is this happening? Why are things like this? Why am I in this position? But why, but why, but why? Until they get to the action like they did. And then, of course, we talked about the freedom, the responsibility, and the choice. I have a quote from Francis Beda, who was in the youth training about 3 years ago when we launched the training with young people post-COVID. To move ideas forward, we need power within the system. Beda did not only launch initiatives to a digital initiative for young people's political participation, but he went on to stand in as a local representative in the council. He campaigned and he won. And so the young people's voices started to be mainstreamed at local government level. We have here Rita from Uganda. She was the director of, let me see if I find that. Let me go back to it. Anyway, she was the director of social transformation in Uganda. And after working with women for that long time, she was a director of this institute. After working with women for that long time, and women said, we need our voices to resonate with the legislatures. We want you there to bring our issues to the fore. So now we have Rita there, who is a legislator in Uganda now, in parliament. And I have another illustration of expressions of freedom. People liberate themselves. You are not liberating them. These are the young people from Sudan who facilitated activism among the young people for the revolution. Unfortunately, things didn't turn out the way they had expected. So most of these young people are now, some are in England, some are in the Netherlands, some are in Egypt, but they try to keep their activism through digital platforms. One key lesson we learned through this process is that finding the voice is key in driving the power and the purpose to liberation. Whether it's an individual or it's a group, it cannot be done on behalf of another. So with TFT, it has to start with my voice, my space, my action, our voice, our space, our action. With networking with who in the space, and why my voice? Where is what is the sacredness of my being here? We learned that when people connect with the value of sacredness, their energy gets driven to break all the barriers and do everything that they can do while they are alive, which they can't do when they are dead. That's why some of them have to leave their countries and live elsewhere, but continue with the struggle. This is the issue with Western Papua. Some of them are living in Scotland, but continue to participate towards the liberation of Western Papua. The second lesson also with training for transformation is that women become more powerful after the training, because maybe, this is our assumption, the space allowed them to find their voice and their power of voice and agency than men who are born and raised with their power of voice. You are in charge, you are the man, you are the leader. But some women, when they discover their voice, they just run with it. And they set up so many initiatives. Let me leave the conversation for now and pause for questions or just dialogue. And this is where you find us. There is an organization from this network where 2 TFT young people are engaging with young people in Zambia. It's called the Sky. Ginoca, am I right?
Sky, they are going now. It's next week. Yeah, they are leaving now.
Thank you. So Sky has already asked the TFT to help.
Ah, okay, Francis, you are from Sky.
From Sky?
Yes, I'm linked to Sky too. So
okay, they're
really looking forward to next week.
Yeah. Okay, let me rest my voice and listen.
That's a lovely saying, Ntombi.
This is how it happens. It's brief because we thought we did it again, but please let us talk about it.
I don't know if anyone else has.
Thanks so much, Ntombi, and welcome. Francis came in just as we started, and at some point Mugove appeared. Welcome. So I think let's ask questions. Let's let a conversation happen. Go ahead. Anybody?
Walter, are you trying to say something?
Hello. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say my apologies for joining late, but I want to thank Ntombi for the presentation. The part that I joined, I think I benefited from that. That's what I wanted to say.
At what point were you in the space, Mgowe?
When you were talking about consciousness.
Oh. Yeah, okay, thank you.
I mean, maybe just from my side, I have heard about training for transformation for many, many years. And so it's really, really wonderful to be connected here. Let me turn my video on, although I hope I haven't brushed my hair this morning. I apologize. So, yeah, I mean, really excited to get in contact with you. And I So I work with the Zambian Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity, so the National Agroecology Alliance in Zambia, which Mogove is part of. And then also supporting the advocacy work in the Seed and Knowledge Initiative, which is now in the 4 countries in Southern Africa. And you'll be doing the training for the youth group next week. And I hope to be able to, I'd asked actually if I could join a part of it so that I can also come and learn. And because I'm going to be holding the advocacy, for me, I'm just holding that. But it's the youth that need to be taking that forward. So I really wanted to understand what the process was so that I can then continue to say, to support or to make connections, for the youth as they need to drive their own agenda forward. So so I hope to connect. Ntombi, are you coming? I'm not sure who's coming next week to
Perhaps Ginoca could respond to that. But
okay.
I'm
Anyway, we can talk about that later. So I don't want to take other people's time. So for me, just the importance of equipping all of us in this process to talk about, to see, to unpack, and to challenge power is so important. And I feel like that is often something that we are missing in our discussions. And that's what makes a lot of us are doing very important agroecology work, transformation on the ground, but we are not challenging the power structures of our social and economic system to enable real long-term change. And if we can equip our youth through this kind of a process to be able to see this and to challenge it as part of their work, wherever, in whatever spaces, then that is really, that's, yeah. That for me is what's so profound about this work. So I think it's difficult. I'd love to kind of even to just know more about the methodology, and also how, if there's how the network, if there is a network that continues after an initial training. So how that support happens in a long run so that you can enable the real change long term rather than a once-off training, because that's what really happens. And I know that like the Sky Group will get support over the long term. But if you could explain that more for me, that would be really helpful. I'm not sure if that would help for others.
Let me just start by saying Ginoca will come in. I will invite Ginoca to come in. Let me just start by saying working with young people was a key lesson for us, because we discovered that these young people were desperate to channel their energy into something meaningful for themselves and for their groups and for their communities. And what we noticed was that working with young people, when they go back, they did not take long to launch this initiative. Now I have a digital company. I'm working with young people. They are nominating me to stand in the local council. I am now a representative in the local council, and we are pushing decisions for young people. And to have young people claiming power in the hierarchy and the hegemony of the structures of their country, we can say it's the steps towards a people's liberation, an expression of freedom. So young people are really critical. That was a key lesson for us, either boys or girls. So I don't know if you know this young man in Zambia. He started just a literacy program. Now he's building a secondary school with his community after the training. That whole thing around awakening the power of identity, voice, and agency. But I will leave it here for Ginoca to continue. Ginoca, are you there?
I am. Hello again. So just to come back to your question, Francis, mentorship is a key part of the process, and also long-term partnerships. We always try 1 year at least, but the ideal would be 2-3 years because we know these transformative processes do not happen immediate. It's not that after 1 week that people suddenly change and become totally, they take some of the tools and the methods and they implement it. And we call it always this process of praxis, which then we gather together with them and look at how did they implement and how did they practice. And along the journey, there's always an informal mentorship. For example, I was 2 years in Angola with Naftal, which is one of the facilitators that goes now, who deals very well with the youth. And he became a mentor naturally to all more the young men there. So even at the personal level, they would tap into him for some kind of mentorship. Of course, he's a reverend, so he has a spiritual background, but also in terms of when they get stuck, they go back to the facilitators. Because most of all, this is a relational approach. So Ntombi spoke about spirituality, but spirituality at a broader sense, where the basis is hope, love, relation. Even when we speak about dialogue, it's not a dialogue of intellectual only, of thinking. It's a dialogue that has to do with empathy that is created towards the other, and it allows the other to become and to express themselves. And of course, as you were saying, I mean, even to challenge structures of oppression takes a while. Of course, that mentorship process is there. I don't know if you want to know the practicalities of the process with Sky, but what we are having is a midterm in August with all of them online. And then we come back to Zimbabwe. There's a whole process on the program, but that is a specific one. Is that what you were wanting to know?
I'm sure I will hear from the team, actually. So I don't want to waste other people's time on that now. So I think for me, it's just wonderful to know, because it's also about thinking how to build this process into our long-term work to support the youth group.
But we can have a further conversation if you then want. We can have a Skype even with the two facilitators, that not this week because they will be there, but afterwards we can create a space specific for that. If you
yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
But we will be giving mentorship afterwards.
Yeah, as we were saying, it's difficult to explain training for transformation. Just need to experience it. And praxis, which is reflection and action, is grounding rule for the practice. We practice, we reflect, we learn, and we practice again. Thank you. It's about adaptation, mitigation, and going on. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question, which I'm sure is the answer is there somewhere in your practice, but I'd like to hear your kind of take on it. A powerful part of sort of agroecology practice, and Fasil being here, you know, we know that ABN's approach is very deeply rooted in indigenous knowledge. And then obviously linked to that, some people call it assets-based community development. So I just wondered how much of your work and what's your take on those notions and practices?
I think that is key. That's why we have dialogue and listening and discerning as the same. Listening, some people will say it's asset mapping or mapping our communities or mapping our realities. You can call it listening survey. When you do listening, it's not a one-off in the community. Go listen with your radio and your notebook. It's living within the community. Experience their daily lives, learn from the wisdom of the indigenous people's practices, and together in the dialogue, bring out what they see as a problem from their perspective. and from their experience, let me see. Yes, from their perspective and from their experience, and together with them work towards finding solutions. So that's your asset mapping. We call these things by different names depending on the context and how things happen. So,
Right, thanks.
yeah.
Okay, in relation, maybe not directly to that, with people's knowledge linked to nature or resources, we tap a lot into, and Ntombi can explain better, into the ancestral knowledge, as I think you both, but through even a part of one of the modules we have called eco-spirituality, which is the strong connection people have with nature. And many of the times we find it more direct to engage with people in that manner than coming with this whatever approach on climate change, on recycle, redo, do whatever, because people's connection to nature is so strong that the linkage is almost immediately. I don't know how to explain better, Ntombi.
No, when we do eco-spirituality, we're looking at the reverence of all creation and the relationship between and among all creations. And to do that, you tap into the traditions and the practices that protected all life and how people benefited. For example, when we were in Tanzania, we had to visit a cave, which they call a shrine. But when we got to the shrine, we found indigenous people explaining the significance of or the existence of God within, among, and all creations. In that space, religious leaders go, military leaders go, government leaders go. So then the significance of the soil, the trees, the water within a country become part of the holy. And when something is holy, then there is respect of nature. However, that is limited because of the mining, the commercial agriculture, which is needed, but sometimes destroys all that reverence to nature. But engaging with people with what they consider as sacred, to look at God not as an import from another place to another place, but to look at God as the one who exists within, around, and among us, and depicted in every creation that we see. The holy water, the holy mountain, the holy tree. You find those things in every culture, in every tradition. I learned so much about that when I was in Ireland. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I?
Go ahead,
Come.
Lucio.
Yeah, Ntombi is really inspiring presentation and thought that I hear. I'm really glad to hear that it's very much aligned with what we are thinking, we're experiencing for the last couple of, for the last 2 decades also. And I haven't been, I think it's a good opportunity also to really being linked with you guys. I totally agree. And this is just to appreciate what you have shared in relation to not only about the activity as an institution, but also most importantly about the thought, the deep thought that you have shared. Because transformation is a very engaging process. And as also what was her name? Your colleague said that it's a kind of process, not necessarily a project. So it needs time, passion, and commitment. Yeah, Ginoca. Yeah, I think we are also trying to bring such kind of transformation for young people and for all society, and then we value the what you call it, the value of sacredness. I think this is a very important and deep aspect of the process, in my opinion. But the challenge is that because the way that we have been taught in schools make us to be less passionate about being part of the life process, and we lose that rigor, so that we are more interested into what we can justify in rational thinking, and what has been presented in graphics and in the numerical, rather than being a part of the process and trust the process and being part of that, so that the transformation comes from those kind of exposure and deep connection. So that is a missing link. That's why I agree with your thought. But the sacredness cannot be written down into somewhere. But it should be part of your. It should be internalized in one's life, and its expression is through something that may not be able to explain. So that's the problem of scientific way of understanding or world outlook of science, is really drifted from its mother, nature, because I mean the scientific knowledge cannot be acquired if nature was not there. So as Thomas Berry says that, I mean, nature is the basis of inspiration for all knowledge. So yeah, I just want to inspire. I mean, just appreciate, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Fasil. You reminded me of an experience when we visited a shrine in Zimbabwe, and the priest wanted to take photographs of the shrine. So they asked the caretaker of the shrine if they could take photographs. And then the woman looked at them and said, "Since when have you ever taken a photograph of your God? You can go ahead and take the photograph, but don't ask me if anything happens to you." And then nobody took a photograph. Everybody took their cameras back into the car or in the bags. So we had to tour the shrine without making any videos, taking any photos, because the sacredness was spiritual beyond any scientific explanation, but just an experience. Thank you, Fasil, for that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Really deep. I'm happy to hear that.
I see we have just 3 minutes left, so just to acknowledge that. But
yeah, I have to. Yeah, maybe I have to, because I will be joining another meeting. I have to leave an apology for that.
right.
So we'll send the slide to you, Doug, so that it goes together with the recording, or you already captured it in the recording?
Say that again, Ntombi.
Do we send the presentation to you, or it's already captured in the recording?
It is in the recording. I think it might be valuable to send it anyway. I think John is building up an archive. So maybe if you don't mind, you could even share it with the group, because certainly there are things in there that I think are really nice. I actually like it that your framework is actually really simple. It's not simplistic, but it's quite easy to see. It kind of gets to the heart of things. I think so many frameworks are just too complicated and more confusing than clarifying. But I find yours really easy and memorable, and so I'm sure that's one of the reasons why people find it so helpful. Yeah. But yeah, thank you. That was very enlivening. I know of Training for Transformation, and I've used many of your resources, but it's always refreshing to get the latest update of who you are and what you do. Yeah. So thank you. Any final comments from anyone else?
Yeah, from me, just to appreciate the presentation, the presenters, and also I'm part of the Sky network, and one of our young people will be attending the training next week. So we really look forward to getting our young people to be able to use this tool. Thank you very much.
And thank you. And for us, this partnership with Sky is extremely important and relevant. And also to AFSA and this network that put us in touch with Sky. It's really exciting. And we want to thank the network and John and Doug, the organizers, for this forum where we exchange our ways of engaging with communities. And yeah, how each one is trying to bring about change in their own ways. And so, yeah, with us, anything else, Francis, also the questions you are posing, if you want, we can have a separate meeting, so that I can answer all your questions. I'll leave you my contact there. And I put in the chat, our presentation.
Thanks, that's
yeah,
brilliant.
but